All right, and I believe we're on air. Ladies, you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can't hear anyone. There we go. Marissa, can you hear me? Your mic is on mute. I can hear you, Jennifer.
Mute. Okay.
There we go. I can hear you, Marissa. And I can
Okay.
hear you, Jennifer. Awesome. All right, we're live. All right, well, welcome, everyone. My name is Marjorie Phoenix. I'm the author of the new memoir, Who the Hell Do You Think You Are? And that's right, we'll get back to that title in just a few moments. But I just want to share with you how we're going to be spending the next hour together. I'm joined by two of my readers. These are two women that have gone through a divorce or currently going through a divorce and have experienced abuse in some form. Now, this is not a platform to be man-bashing or throwing eggs in anyone's face tonight. This is a platform for women, specifically women that are going through a traumatic divorce and they're experiencing some form of abuse. This conversation, this just gives us an opportunity to talk about an area of abuse that really isn't given much attention to, and that's the mental, emotional, and financial abuse. The guests will share their stories with us briefly, but it's always going to be about educating and empowering women with information. And I love the quote by Maya Angelou where she says, when you know better, you do better. So if you can recognize these signs and know what they are, then you're able to better protect yourself. Because this type of abuse is not something that's very visible, like physical abuse, we don't really pay much attention to it. And really what it is when you start to look at it more closely is it's a form of oppression. It's oppressing a person. It's an abuse of power, and it's an abuse also of the system when divorce is involved. Divorce affects our communities. It affects society. We know that anytime a family is broken because of divorce, it's going to affect the families around them. It's going to affect communities. It's not a private social issue. It is a public, it's a social issue for everyone. We should all be very aware of this. And so what I want us to look at is what are some of the long-lasting effects of this? Because there's so many tentacles that start to reach out when there is abuse. It affects not just the woman that's being abused, but it's affecting the children. If children are involved, then it can affect the outside families on both sides. Then it can affect the friends, the people that are close to them, their circle of influence. It can affect now that community. So this isn't something for us to just ignore and sit back and think that it's a private issue. And it's also affecting women on every socioeconomic level. And in fact, I just learned that financial abuse affects households making over $100,000 a year or more. Mostly that seems to be the prevalent sort of abuse there, where the spouses believe that they have more that they need to protect. So we won't be able to go into everything tonight. We won't be able to answer all of the questions and solve such a huge issue in an hour. But this is a precursor of what's to come as we're moving forward. My goal is to make this Google Hangout discussion a monthly affair. So I hope that you all will continue to join us. So now let's go to my book, Who the Hell Do You Think You Are? You can find the book right here on Amazon. The link should be posted somewhere below. It's my memoir that chronicles my personal journey through a very traumatic divorce that left me homeless and penniless. And the reason I titled the book this way is because when I sat across the dining room table from my then husband and I was sharing with him my dreams to work with women in some way, he asked me, "Who the hell do you think you are? What makes you think that these women will listen to you? You have no formal training, you have no education, you haven't been to college. Who the hell do you think you are?" And you know, it's not so much that he asked that question, it's so much that I could not answer it. I did not know who the hell I was. I really had lost a sense of myself, and I had taken on an identity in which he had given to me. And so these are the types of things that can happen when you're going through verbal abuse. You lose your sense of self. You have an identity crisis. You have a lack of self-confidence. So in my book, I answer that question. And I wrote this not really wanting to be honest with you. It's really difficult to put your story out there when you're so vulnerable. Yet it was clear to me that the story needed to be written. When I was sitting there pouring my soul out in print, not knowing how my situation was going to turn out, not knowing what was going to happen day to day, really just trying to keep my sanity and keep myself together. It was clear to me that the book is not about me. The book is about women that will go through this situation or have gone through this situation. And what is so amazing is that once the book was printed, God just opened doors. And the people that read the book approached me. And they gave me cues on how important, well, where I should be going with this, what direction I should be going, and telling me how important they thought my story was and how important this discussion is. So with my story, I did not want to just tell you my story. There's so many stories out there. As you can tell, these two women on tonight, they have a story as well. We all have a story. But what was important was that I shared how this experience changed me, how I'm going to use this experience. And this is just one of those ways. So I'm going to start off by reading an excerpt from the book and then interview one of the guests. This is from chapter 2 of Who the Hell Do You Think You Are? I was taken directly to jail. My chest is heavy, my mind is racing, and a lightness sweeps over me. Being enclosed in the back seat of a car heightens my claustrophobia. It reads on my face, and the officer offers to crack the window for my comfort. I do my best to take calm, deliberate breaths to prevent hyperventilation. I'm surprised by the short trip to the county jail, living here for 7 years, to discover I was not too far removed from its location. We pull up through double gates laced with barbed wires to the most assuming single-level yellow building. At the main entrance, the officer and I sit in the car waiting for a female officer to escort me in. We pass those few awkward minutes chatting about the episode at the house. He confides in me that it was an unnecessary move for my husband to have had me arrested. But because of the laws, he had no choice. And it would seem my husband knew this. The female deputy comes out. He hands me over to her, telling her to take care of me. She escorts me down a narrow corridor where an inventory is taken of my belongings. All I have with me is my little blue dress I'm wearing, my wallet, and my wedding bands. I'm told to strip and a body search is conducted. I'm given an orange jumpsuit that must be a mixture of polyester and cotton, weighing at least 2 pounds. Fingerprinted, followed by a brief photo session, and then placed in a closed room. At first, I'm taking everything in stride while under the impression I'll be released in a few hours. Not too long after that thought, the female officer informs me that that will not happen today. It was too late to add my name to the list of first appearance before the judge. I will have to remain here until tomorrow morning. This would mean a 24-hour overnight stay in lockup. Panic sets in, tears begin to flow, and my head is instantly filled with voices. I'm given my one phone call. My knees become weak as I walk towards the phone on the wall. I have to call my oldest daughter to inform her I will not be coming home. I try to compose myself as I give her the news and can hear in her voice that she is afraid. I have to be strong for her, even though I'm coming apart on the inside. She tells me that she's torn because she does not want to leave her little sister, yet cannot stay in the house after what has just happened, not knowing how to be there without me. She decides to pack a bag and asks the neighbors across the street to take her to school. I encourage her to go to school and do her best to stay focused. My heart aches that she has to go through this. Being in her last year of high school, I do not want her to get distracted. Unfortunately, she and her stepfather had not had the best relationship. There's so much I did not know until much later when she shared her thoughts and experiences with me and what was written in her journal over the years. There were things that I was not aware of, and reading them I felt so ashamed. How could I not have seen it? I always knew their relationship was strained as she became a young adult with her own opinions and a voice, and their arguments would become our arguments within the marriage. I thought being hands off was the best approach. When I defended her, I was being a disobedient wife that did not respect my husband's authority. When I tried to get her to see things his way, I felt as though I was not protecting my child. The women's wing in the jail is a large open room with 6 rows of bunk beds and numerous cots lining the walls and the floor. The walls and floors are white, and the space is cold. The place is crowded with women sitting on hard plastic chairs and picnic benches, all looking up at the blaring television on the wall, with an open shower and laboratory area. There is no privacy. Once I settle on my cot on the floor, it starts to sink in that my freedom has just been taken away from me, and it was all orchestrated by the man I loved. Mealtime was the worst time for me. My stomach was sending me signals that it could not tolerate food. I sit looking down at a plastic tray with a sandwich, an apple, and a pasty substance I can't identify. I look at my food and break down. This would give the others at the table the assumption that I did not want my food and the opening to help themselves to it. All the questions I tried to suppress to keep myself from falling to pieces flood my mind. Why did he do this? What will happen when I go home? Can I go home? Why, God? Are my girls all right? What will happen to me? I tried to find a way to put it all together of what has just happened to my life. The icebreaker in the room is the same question. Why are you in here? When I tell them my story, they laugh. Apparently, this is common knowledge of this maneuver. It is used often when there is a divorce pending. Get the other person out of the house with a charge like simple battery, and you have the courts on your side. I'm being informed by more than one inmate that I will not be allowed back into my home. This is hard to believe, since I have nowhere else to go. Oh, Marissa, can you mute your line for us, please? Thank you. The next morning, I'm handcuffed along with a few other female inmates to appear before the judge. The women are all housed in a smaller area off from the larger quarters from the men, en route to our hearing. We had to walk past a large glass window that gave view to their spacious accommodations. In a small room, we're all seated, then followed by the men. There are at least 12 of us in the room with 4 deputies and a television screen. When my name is called, I stand facing the camera and the television, where I can see the judge. She reads my charges and informs me that I am not allowed to go within 500 feet of my home or my husband pending a trial date, and then released on my own recognizance. The other inmates had all been right. It took a few hours to get the paperwork together, and while waiting, a female deputy that sat at a desk inside the women's quarters shared some information and resources that I will need. She has a reputation amongst the inmates as being real hard and difficult, but that isn't my experience with her. Finally, I'm being released, and the female deputy that processed me in yesterday is also processing me out. As she escorts me out the main gate, she says to me, I don't know why you were here, but sometimes God whispers to us in a loud way. I will never forget those words. As the large barbed wire gates close behind me, I walk a deserted road with just the clothes on my back, shoes on my feet, my wallet in my hand, not sure where I'm going. Laughing and crying and thinking just 2 days ago I was in the comfort of my own home, and now I'm walking the streets of a small town where I have no family. When you read the book, each of the chapters will end this way, sort of like a cliffhanger, because I'm taking you along in my journey, and I never know what's going to happen next. And so you're going to see that as you read it. Every day was just about getting through one day at a time. That was my reality. And I didn't want to just, like I said before, tell you my story, but I wanted you to feel my story, and I wanted you to feel my pain. I'm going to read the second part of the book a little later, but right now I want to introduce my first guest, Jennifer.
Hello.
There we go. Hello, Jennifer. Jennifer and I have just recently met after she purchased my book. She told me she read the intro on Amazon and she knew she just had to have it. We've been in discussions about helping Jennifer get her written work in print so that she can share her story. She's really got a story to share. And Jennifer has been in 3 abusive relationships. And I want to talk to Jennifer about when this all started and the patterns behind it and the effect it had on her and why she believes she chose the man that she did. Um, so Jennifer, thank you for coming on this evening. Just tell us a little bit about some of the experiences you had as far as what the emotional and the mental abuse looked like in that first relationship.
With my first marriage, after we had been married for a little while, it was like he changed. It was like all of a sudden he became very possessive of me. Um, when we first met, I would always do my hair, do my makeup, just the little things like that. Well, he became like very controlling. He didn't even want me to wear makeup. One wouldn't even let me like tuck my shirt into my pants. It was just the little things, and he became like really abusive. And his favorite thing was if he knew something that I really cared about something, he destroyed it. Like, for example, I had a collection of different figurines that my granny had bought me over time. And he could snap, and we would get into an argument, and then he would just break them and laugh. I had a composition book full of poetry that I had wrote through high school. Well, he did not like me writing, so he burned that. And, that was his way of saying, well, I took something from you. And it was just over time, I wound up having 2 sons by him, and the and the the abuse, um,
Take your
he
time.
would just kind of like, well, he didn't really drink too much, but he did smoke pot. And he would rather have more money to spend on pot than to buy groceries. um I can't count the times that, I mean, I worked a full-time job, and he would get off And, you know, if I was like a minute late coming in, he would accuse me of things. And it's like, how can you, I mean, I would just come straight home from work. I'm sorry, I just,
That's fine. That's fine.
you know, there was a lot of times that his favorite thing was like to beat me down. And when I say beat me down, he would like just corner me in the bedroom or in the bathroom and like take his work boots and just would kick my legs. So to the like now I have broken veins in my legs from, you know, just the bruises and the marks that he left on me. Um,
Jennifer, let me just interrupt you real quickly and ask
okay.
you about the transition from just the verbal and
Yes.
emotional to the physical. How quickly did that happen? And, you know, did you see where it started to escalate? Was there any signs that that would happen next, that it would get physical?
Um, it was his the abuse actually started, you know, almost immediately. And there would be times that he would beat me, and it would, like the next day, it would be like, oh, I'm sorry, it will never happen again, you know, and whether it would be, say, a, you know, 6 months down the road to, you know, a month or a week, it got where with each time that with the beating was worse. Um, Matter of fact, the very last time that he beat me, um, he had actually held like my oldest son inside, and I managed before I went outside to call his mom, and I just made out like, you know, I needed to speak to his brother, and that was like a red flag to them, you know, something was going on. And when his mom told his brother, because I had to go ahead and get off the phone because he was coming at me, um, his his brother told his mom, he's like, he knew that he was actually, I'm sorry to say his name, he knew that he was actually, you know, probably doing something to me. So he left to come to the house to check on me and the boys. And at this time, he had already jumped on me, throwed the dinner that I had already cooked all over the kitchen floor, and had done got me by the throat, hit me in all kind of ways, and I managed to get outside with my youngest son. And I remember I was sitting in my car because I didn't have my keys, and I had my youngest son like sitting in between me and the steering wheel. And my oldest son was like standing at the doorway looking out crying, wanting to come to me. But he couldn't come out. And when my husband come around, he got up in my face in between me and my baby son in the car. And when he hit me so hard in my nose that the blood just, it went like all over my baby son. And
Mm-hmm. So
anyway,
let me ask you, was the family now knew about this? So do you feel like you had any protection?
yeah, when his brother showed up, he actually had his brother to, which was my husband, to, you know, go ahead and let me at least get my son some clothes. And I managed to get both my sons. And whenever we got to his parents' house that night, I had tried through the years to, you know, I told his mom about this, but I think they were like pretty much in denial that their son could actually physically do this to somebody. But whenever I walked into their house that night, and his mom seen me, the way that I looked with the blood and everything all over me and the marks on me, her first words was, I didn't realize it was as bad as this. So it's
Mhm.
like until they physically and they seen me,
Mhm. Mhm.
that's when they realized, how bad everything was.
Right. And typically, when something, because they said more and more cases of abuse, you start to see the escalation from the emotional and mental. And the more the abuser feels that they have the power to continue to do this, they'll do it and they will push the boundaries. And people on the outside looking in may not recognize some of the verbal attacks, some of the mental attacks, some of the psychological, oppression that's going on, the financial oppression. People may not recognize that, family members specifically. And then it takes a situation like yours where you show up, and the damage is done at that point and it's too late. This is why it's so important, because the thing about women, and you know this because all of your relationships, your marriages have been like this, the physical is one aspect, but there's mental and there's the other stuff too. I mean, that's the difference. Women with the who get physically abused, they have the entire gamut, all of the abuse that goes along with it, because the abuser uses all of those tools at his disposal.
Mm-hmm.
When a woman can recognize early with the emotional abuse, she can protect herself and know that this will get worse. I believe now more than ever that I was probably saved by being removed out of my home the way I was, as traumatic as it was. Looking back now, I feel like that was the hand of God removing me out of that house, because it could have been a whole lot worse than that. But so let me just ask you two more questions here, Jennifer, about the effects it had on you. So now you divorced him, and how did this leave you mentally and emotionally?
It it was like I was pretty much I had lost all my self-esteem, and I had to basically build myself back up, and I had to I had to work on getting me back because I had became a person that was beat down that I didn't even know no more. I didn't even realize how bad that it had affected me until, I was out of the marriage with him.
Mhm, mhm. What attracted you to these men?
When I look back, I, I think now, after all these years, I think that it was almost like I seen, because I've always been kind of like a caretaker. So I guess in a strange way, I felt like, if I was in this person's life, I could help take care of them. I could help, change them for the better, you know, but it didn't work out that way.
Mhm. And you told me you read my book. You couldn't put it down. You really enjoyed it. Can you share with us, how do you feel reading my story helped you?
Your story was actually really inspiring because in a lot of ways we have like a lot in common. I have kind of like been in your shoes, but not in your shoes, and just the faith alone that got you through the rough days, and just constantly believing and praying and knowing that, each day is going to get better. And, like you had 20 years worth of writing, and I did not realize that until after reading your book. I'm the same way. I have now over 20 years of writing too. That's just been sitting here and me not doing anything with it. But thanks to you, pretty soon, I'll be able to share my story with everybody.
Mhm. Yes, most
You
definitely.
you are a blessing to many, and you just don't realize it.
Thank you. And, I really appreciate that. I want to thank you so much for your bravery in coming on tonight and sharing this. Because when I spoke with you and I heard your story, I said there's so much there. And when we look at a situation like yours, Jennifer, and we know that there was a pattern that you went from one to another, we can't fault you entirely because people can sit and judge, especially when it comes to a situation like yours. But the roots of the victim of abuse can go so deep from either childhood messages or from messages from the first relationship that leaves you doubting yourself, you're doubting your self-worth, your value, questioning your decisions, questioning your identity. And so you end up becoming drawn to partners that give you a false sense of yourself. And it's sort of filling this gap in your life. But it's a learned pattern after a while. But what I really want to celebrate is who you are today, Jennifer. You have been able to, when I look at your life, you're independent, you're smart, you're so strong, and I don't see this ever happening in your life again. And now you're opening another chapter in your life where you're going to take the lessons that you've learned. It's about how you use it now. And you're going to be sharing that with others to help them in some way. And you have, and we didn't get to talk about this much, but you have your form of therapy, which was the writing, and you also ride your motorcycle. And there were things that you're doing for yourself and you've been doing to help build that self-esteem and your self-worth. And that is so important. So just want to thank you again for coming on tonight, Jennifer.
Well, thank you.
Before I go to my next guest, I'm going to read for you a little bit again one of the chapters in the book. This is an afterthought. I have met some amazing women over the year that I was going through my divorce and since. These women have suffered some horrendous situations in their divorces that have left them in pieces. They literally have lost their identity because of it. They've lost their self. So my story isn't all that unique. But what I've learned is that the adversity brings about opportunity for change. You've got to know how to identify these things in your life so that you can be empowered. And so what I wanted to do was add some afterthoughts in the book, and I've added 7 chapters of afterthoughts. They're reflections or commentary on lessons that I've learned through it all and how I believe that it can help you. This is afterthought number 3. When you're stripped of everything you hold dear and valuable, even the stuff that are false and a joke in your life, you can find yourself feeling the size of an ant. I had many moments during this 15-month ordeal I call slap-in-the-face moments where I would hear, "Who the hell do you think you are?" And if it were not for an inner resilience in my faith, I would have answered nobody and would have kept myself small as an ant. But instead, each slap-in-the-face moment brought out the fight in me. Like the scene in Rocky, where he keeps getting knocked down and his opponent has already turned his back on him and started celebrating in victory. But when he turns around, Rocky is getting back up, bloodied and battered. When you feel like you're depleted of any energy to take even the next step, I will tell you that there is fight left inside of you. It's not something magical. It's a natural human instinct to survive in the worst of situations. It's the thing that when we're on the ground and we can't walk, we crawl. It's the thing where we gasp for that little piece of air when we feel like we're drowning in the sea of life. We do enough to keep our heads above water. And for those of you that have lived a relatively drama-free, crisis-free life, I haven't met many of you, when you have your first experience with something that kicks you in the butt and puts your entire existence as you know it at stake, it can lead you to ask yourself, who am I? Most of us don't know who we are, and usually it will take a foe, a friend, a soulmate who knows your weakness to bring you to the point of questioning your identity. Why is it when we lose a job we find ourselves feeling less about ourselves? Why is it when someone ends a relationship with us and leaves us feeling rejected, we're questioning our worth? Why is it when we can't find the success we're looking for, nothing seems to get better, we see ourselves as a failure? Part of it, I believe, is a lack of knowing who we truly are. I lost my sense of self in my marriage and the morning I went to jail. After throwing a wedding album, I'm now the victimizer and carry a criminal record that reads domestic battery. This would ultimately be on every job application I now complete. But I know that that is not who I am. These circumstances do not make me, and your circumstances do not make you. The other person will try to use these things to convince you that you are who you are, that which they say you are. You are what took place in that moment in time, or you are who they say you are. The thief comes to steal, to kill, and destroy your identity. Remember who you are as a child of God. Again, the book is available on Amazon, and the link should be there below. My next guest is Marissa. Marissa and I have known each other for a few years now. We met in school, college, two moms in college math class. When I think of Marissa, I think of Susie Homemaker and Martha Stewart together. She is such a loving and patient mother. And I hate to see what she and her kids have to go through right now. But this is the reality of divorce and abuse. Because Marissa, was a stay-at-home mom, of course, all of the resources her resources are limited to her right now. And our stories are somewhat similar. The only difference is, she's got family that she can lean on and she can go to. And what Marissa's also finding is the lack of resources for women that are available in a time like this, and the emotional toil that it's taking on her and her children. So I don't want to get into too many details because she is in the middle of this, but I want us to just talk about her pain right now, what she's experiencing, what it looks like, whatever she feels free to share with us about what's happening to her and the effects of it. So, Marissa?
Thank you, Marjorie, and I apologize if I break out into a coughing fit. I'm getting over a flu, and I've had a lot of coughing, so I apologize in advance.
No problem.
I met Marjorie in 2012, and I was very struck by how poised and how together she was. And when she told her story, she didn't do it from a place of victim, rather, a person that had overcome these things, and that, I could see that she was still beautiful and vibrant, and I could see that she had inner strength that had only been sharpened because of the things that she went through. And even back then, my husband and I were going through a lot of issues. He suffers from bipolar, and he was only diagnosed last year, but we've been together for 10 years. And he and my oldest son, which is only from my previous relationship, had a very strained relationship the whole time. And things only got worse when my husband and I started having children of our own, and it caused a lot of tension because I kind of felt like I was almost a referee put in between my husband and my child. Um, Anything that my child did was viewed with the extreme prejudice, and he was punished. And if I didn't punish and I didn't raise my voice loud enough and everything, it all came back to me. And it got to the point where eventually my motives, my everything was questioned, and I felt like I couldn't do anything right. And he also had a very high expectation as to how the house should look. And it was, since I didn't work outside the home, the bar was set very high, and so it was always a lot of subtle disapprovals. And when those subtle disapprovals didn't work sometimes because I was so overwhelmed with so many different things that I had to take care of with 4 children and a stay-at-home husband and the dogs and everything, it got to where my performance was constantly criticized, and I could never do enough. And so I kind of felt really beaten down as a person, as a woman, as a mother, as a housekeeper. And for the most part, I tried to keep my spirits high. I try always to do 110% in everything that I do. But even when you try that hard and you're still found lacking and your motives are always questioned, it wears on you. And then having to deal with his undiagnosed mental illness and everything, there was always a crisis. So we were either on a high, everything's going great, let's go out and overspend, let's go buy a brand new house, let's go buy a new car, to it went on the opposite side, and there was all the depression, and it was very difficult, all the highs and the lows, and I tried to keep positive throughout all of it. It ended up being that there was a lot of false accusations in our relationship, many about whether or not I was having affairs, whether or not I was stealing, and none of these things ever came to pass, but those beliefs were there, and unfortunately it got to the point where my accusations were made against my oldest son, and he had to be removed from the house, and that was the point where I said, I can't do this anymore. I have to leave. I had to leave. I had to leave for the sake of my children. I think as a woman I could have probably bear so much, but when it comes to the safety of the children, it came to a point where it's like, if I stay, that can be compromised. And so I did it. I think it gave me the courage to get out of that situation. And since I've left, there's still been a lot of verbal, a lot of emotional abuse, and a lot of financial abuse.
Can we talk a little bit about that, Marissa? Can you just give us some examples of what the financial abuse would look like?
Yeah. When I left, it was agreed that I would receive a certain amount of money, plus I would be allowed to keep the vehicle, and he would pay for my phone. I get some Social Security money for the children, and that goes directly to me, so that can't be messed with. But since that happened, for the first month or two, there was a lot more, there wasn't as much tension between he and I, but the more that I started to put emotional distance between him and I, the amounts of money started dropping. He went and opened a second bank account at that bank where the deposit that I was supposed to get, and I was promised that this amount of money would come in, and it did, but whatever he chose to leave me was left in the account. And so then, there were months where I was supposed to get, say $800, and I got $178 one month. And then there was always the threats of, I'm going to stop paying for the car. I'm going to come take the car. I'm going to cut your phone off, and he was supposed to help me get into an apartment because of the place where I was living. I wasn't going to be able to stay there for too long, and he never did. He was supposed to give me $1,500 to move into an apartment, and he gave me $500. I'm like, I can't move into any place for $500. And so...
And he did take the car eventually, didn't he?
Yeah, I told him, I said, well, if you can't help me get into an apartment, then I guess I can just move back into our old house when the lease, because it was rented out, I can move back into that house. And that very next day, that night, he sent somebody to come and pick up the vehicle at like almost 11 o'clock at night, and took my wallet and things that were in the car. And so I eventually got my wallet back, but not the vehicle. And so he cut off my access to moving back to Palm Coast because it's 2.5 hours away from where I live. Because he didn't want me to move back there because he'll lose his rental income. So now I haven't had a vehicle now for over a month because he just chose to take it away. And he called the Department of Children and Families on me when I put in a child support case against him. My children were pulled out of school and questioned because he said that I was abusive towards my daughter. They've wrapped him up and dropped all the charges against me, but now it's like he's trying to, make me look as bad as possible. He's threatened to send letters to friends and church family and things like that, alleging these horrible things that I never did.
Yeah. And see, all of these are so important that you're bringing these up, because some of these things to people on the outside looking in, they're like, oh, that's just like a marital dispute. Okay, yeah, it's a part of a marital dispute. But what he's doing to you, that's an oppression, number one, because he's leaving you without a vehicle for you and your children to get around. The threats, the psychological warfare that he's doing on you by going to Children Protective Services. When they go to these measures, they go to things that they know that will affect you the most. So when there's some feedback, I don't know who that's coming from. But when they do this, they're attacking you right where they know it's going to hurt the most. Things like that. So, and that's one of the things that when I was really researching and looking at emotional, psychological abuse and that sort of thing, that was one of the things that they talked about. I'm looking here at my list. They talk about how they do emotional blackmail, threatening to take your kids from you, threatening to call Child Protective Services on you, using those types of things. The harassments, constantly texting you and telling you these things and calling you names. What was so interesting to me is that I found out that 55% of divorces are because of psychological abuse. And that was back in 1996. Now, I don't know what the numbers are looking like now, but I'm sure they're a lot higher. And it's interesting because when we're in this kind of a marriage, we're going along with it. We sense something isn't right, but for some reason, we submit to it. So what was it for you, Marissa, that you submit to it for so long?
Well, I think that part of it was wanting to stay true. I became a Christian early in our marriage, and the Bible tells me, be like this, be like that. If you look at Proverbs 31, it tells you about a virtuous wife and all of the wonderful things that she is and what she does. And so I really tried hard to be a Proverbs 31 wife. And, if you look in other parts of the Bible, in the New Testament, it'll tell you, wives, submit to your husbands and all these things. And, you kind of in the back of your mind, think, okay, this is how it should be. However, it's like, men love that one verse, and that was thrown in my face a lot. Anytime that I raised my voice, anytime that I disagreed, anytime that I, had something wanted to do things a different way. It's like, well, you're supposed to be this way. But, the problem with that is that, it's a reciprocal thing. Yes, you're supposed to be submissive, but he, on the other hand, is supposed to be, loving the church, laying his life down for the church, putting the church before himself. Mm-hmm. And so I couldn't make him do that. So I figured if I kept bending over backwards, if I kept doing all of that, maybe eventually he would do that part. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And he would live up to his side of what was expected of him. And plus, I wanted my children to have stability. I knew that I could leave him and come and live with family members like I have been, but I didn't want to put my children through that. I wanted them to have their own rooms. I wanted them to have that stability. And for the longest time, I sacrificed my what I feel like my morals, my ideals, my self-worth as a person in order to get that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Most definitely. And I know what you're talking about, Marissa. When you do grow up in a Christian home, you marry a Christian man, and you're both going to church, and you know what the word says, and you want to be that Proverbs 31 woman. You want to be a godly woman. And, I wrestle with that because I prayed a lot through my marriage, and that didn't save it. And I went through a really traumatic situation, but I do know that God was there with me through it and got me through it. But that's probably another discussion we need to have. And one thing I want to say, this isn't about, someone being wrong and right, or we're right and they're wrong, or anything like that. And it's not that we're perfect. Everyone has their flaws, everyone has their faults, everyone has made mistakes, because marriage is one of those things where you're sort of learning as you go. Mm-hmm. But when it comes time that you decide you're going to end that marriage, my quote, this is my quote now, I thought about this the other day, it may not be an easy way to do it, but there's a right way to do it.
Right.
And that is where I think they've fallen short, because what they did at a time is they started becoming even more abusive during that time. I had the question that, do you think it's divorce that brings out the worst in someone, or was it always there? And I think all of us, probably looking back, could say it was probably always there. We chose to ignore it, or just not pay attention to it. But what we can do now moving forward is, now that we know, if we're going forward into any relationships, we know how to better choose mates. And we can now take these lessons that we've learned and help other women, because there are many women living in mentally abusive, verbally abusive marriages right now. They probably want to get out, don't know how to get out, but there's a right way to get out to help protect themselves from what we had to go through. And so that's what I'm hoping we'll continue to do as we have these discussions. I want to do the next one again next month and just talk and go a little bit deeper with all of this, so that we can just make women more aware and start to change some of the cycle in all of this. So, and just my last question to you, Marissa, you've had a chance to read some of my book. How do you feel that it helped you?
I feel that it really helped me because, it makes me feel like, I'm not the only one that went through this. And I've also learned, really picked up about just the things that I can do for myself to, to face this process that I'm going through. And, knowing that despite whatever I'm going through, your faith kept you strong through yours, and know that that faith that I have in God will also get me through this as well.
Yes, most definitely. And I think for women to also know that our stories sort of mirror each other. So if they know that they've got support somewhere, if they can sort of see
Look for
steps, exactly. Yeah, and then you can start to look at ways that you can help if you're in that situation to go through it because of we've already gone through it, and we'll make this the path easier for you. So thank you again, ladies, so much. I appreciate your time. You've been a blessing as well. This is my first Google Hangout discussion, and I really appreciate you being a part of it, and I look forward to having more discussions with you guys, okay?
Thank you.
All right, have a good night.
Thank you.
And thank you
You
all for
too.
joining us. We'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.